This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Africa, coming to you live from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. I am Peninah Karibe. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome to the show. We begin with a look at the markets, and trading across global markets was mixed today as Asian stocks fell the most in 2 weeks, while Europe steadied. While investors are pricing in optimism about the start of vaccine shots, there's also ongoing concern over whether a stimulus bill from a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the United States will gain traction. The virus continued to rage in the US and across the nation. Authorities have warned that people should be prepared for a full shutdown. European governments are also tightening measures. Coming up on the show tonight. Africa's economy projected to rebound by 3.2% in 2021. Earnings for Tanzania's cashew nut growers expected to fall this year. And China's economic growth expected to accelerate in 2021. We begin in Nigeria. It is currently in its second economic recession in 4 years, but authorities believe this will be short-lived. Both the country's finance minister and governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria have projected that the country could exit recession by the first quarter of 2021 and forecast a positive GDP growth in 2021. Here's CGTN's Dejo Badmas with more on that story.
Nigeria's second quarter contraction, which caused the economy to slip into recession, was widely expected. But at just minus 3.62%, the scale of the contraction was quite surprising. Many had projected a much steeper contraction. Fiscal and monetary authorities say the lower than expected decline is largely a result of the huge funding interventions they made to cushion the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on households and businesses.
With sustained implementation of our intervention measures, we do expect that the Nigerian economy could emerge from the recession by the first quarter of 2021. We also expect that growth in 2021 will attain 2.0%. However, downside risks remain, as restoration of full economic activities, particularly in service-related sectors, remain uncertain until a COVID vaccine is produced and made available to millions of people across the world.
The Nigerian government rolled out its economic sustainability plan back in June this year to tackle the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. The plan provides for a $5 billion stimulus package targeted at job creation, households and businesses. The central bank has so far been an important driver of the initiative, providing unprecedented funding support of the economy.
We have seen that this has been quite impactful, particularly the targeted credit facility, which is meant for households and SMEs, because what we saw during this period is that it has helped to boost consumption spending for our SMEs. And if you know or recall that consumption constitutes over almost 70% of output, you will know that this has been very, very impactful in moderating the impact of the COVID-19 on productivity and output and GDP in our country.
The government is still coming up with more initiative and literally putting more money in the hands of the people with the hope of turning things around for the economy.
So I think the steps are the things are in the right direction, but these policies need to be complemented with other policies, just as the CDN governor said. We need to complement it with this. We need to address the issue of the structural issues. We need to address the issue at the ports. We also need to address the issue of logistics and all of that. So there has to be complementary policies on the fiscal side to support what is happening on the monetary side. And just as I said, we need to address the issue of the foreign exchange market.
One other good thing for Nigeria is that oil prices are gradually picking up, and that could help shore up the country's reserve and keep its currency stable. And with COVID-19 vaccine now being approved for use, some bit of normalcy may begin to return to the global economy. That, of course, would further boost the local economy here and possibly get the country off the recession as quickly as officials are predicting. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Nigeria.
After being through the worst recession in its recent history in 2020 with a 4.2% decline of GDP, economists at the Allianz expect the African economy to rebound by 3.2% in 2021. COVID-19 infection rates remained relatively low on the continent compared with other parts of the world. However, African economies were severely hit by the crisis due to weak internal and external demand and commodity price shocks. In 2021, the recovery will be essentially driven by stronger domestic and world demand and trade, higher commodity prices and resuming tourism activity, expected to benefit from supportive fiscal stimuli and good financing conditions globally. All right, so we're now joined by Konrad Vrolik. He is the regional CEO for Allianz Africa, and he joins us live from Geneva for more insights on this. Konrad, your economic outlook for Africa for the year 2021 is quite optimistic. You forecast a rebound by 3.2% for the continent. What is driving this optimism?
I don't know if I would call it optimism. We are forecasting a growth of 4.6% for the global economy. And Africa is 3.2%. So I would actually say that we are being quite pessimistic on the African continent. Why? Well, most of this growth is only coming through in the second half of 2021. We are expecting weaker commodity prices, a low tourism rebound, especially in the first half and through the important summer season, remittances to impact Africa quite significantly. And only give 3.2. So it's more pessimistic than optimistic.
Right. And so having painted for us that picture, you also mentioned in your report the public debt shouldered by many African countries, and that has gone up to hardly sustainable levels. And so with this kind of financial burden, and given that governments must focus on development, among other things, what do you see as the drivers of this economic growth of 3.2% you talk about?
Look, there's a number of countries that are clearly challenged fiscally. Countries like Zambia, Angola, Mozambique have debt levels that are very high and difficult to manage. But the bulk of Africa is in a situation where, although it's high, a combination of continued investment in infrastructure, I would say the good news of the Biden presidency, he recently announced his new Africa policy, and hopefully good progress in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I think these are sort of underpinnings that will let us continue through and still get that 3.2%.
So you talk of Africa's growth being largely driven by not just local, but also global demand, trade, tourism, and high commodity price. The question though is, how practical is it for the continent's growth to be pegged on these factors, given that a majority of the countries in the world are right now on their knees? They are struggling with this COVID-19 pandemic.
Situation for everybody. Obviously, the more diversified your economy is, the more resilient you will be. I think countries like Kenya are actually amongst the more diversified in Africa, and so they should come out of this stronger than countries that are more focused on just one thing or a commodity. I still think, as I mentioned at the beginning, 3.2% is nothing to write home about. This is growth, but it's coming from a difficult start, and it's only going to come in the second half.
All right, so let's talk about your recent transaction with Jubilee Insurance. It cost $100 million. It's been billed as one of the largest transactions in the industry in recent years. Now, generally, insurance penetration in Africa is very low. In Jubilee, to support your investment in the region?
Look, our partnership with Jubilee is part of our overall Africa investment strategy, and that's really to be in the markets that are important in Africa. And we firmly believe that the markets that Jubilee operates in as a regional champion are markets that, as Allianz, as one of the global insurance leaders, we should be in. And partnering with one of the regional champions like Jubilee is by far the best way to both combine the local expertise that they bring to the table and the kind of global expertise that we have from our side. You touched on low insurance penetration is not high in Africa. It roughly goes between 1% to up to 2% of GDP in countries like Kenya. This is obviously still at a big step back from emerging markets, but we do hope that by offering new products and further services that we increase the insurance usage also in East Africa.
And you know, when we talk about insurance in Africa, the attitude in the continent towards insurance has mainly been that of indifference. You know, people rely more on social insurance, their relatives, their family members and friends. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, do you think there's been any significant change in attitude?
I wish. I think COVID-19 has been a shock to everybody, not just in Africa, but across the world. And I think people are still not able to fully digest what's happening yet. One of the partner companies of Allianz is Bima, and they're quite active in Ghana and also in Tanzania. And I would say that, and they sell essentially products like cash hospital products, family member death products, products that are really geared to the lower end of our economies. And I do see strong growth in those kinds of products. So, you know, for so far as COVID has affected everybody in the population, we do see a pickup at that lower end.
All right, Conrad, it's a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Conrad Vrolik joining us live from Geneva. Now, embattled airline South African Airways has a new board in place. The financially ill airline is currently under business rescue and is desperately looking for an equity partner. From Johannesburg, here is CGTN Sumitra Naidu with more details.
6 non-executive directors have been appointed to a new board at South African Airways. It's an important milestone for the airline that was placed into business rescue on the 6th of December 2019, just over.
This is a group of individuals that have accepted this challenge of managing an airline, hopingly that after it's been restructured after the business rescue process, it will be a partner who can come in and provide a leadership team and also introduce their own technical, financial, operational expertise into the business.
Many are placing their hopes of good governance and independence with this new board. SAA has been riddled with corruption scandals and government interference for decades.
If DPE claims that they're genuine about cleaning up SAA, no member of the current SAA board should exist on this new interim board. Shouldn't be the case. Secondly, the fact that no one from Labour has been appointed, the fact that no member of civil society has been appointed, as far as we're concerned, we're not holding our breath. We've been through this before.
But the Department of Public Enterprises believes the mismanagement and graft at the airline is a thing of the past, and an interim board will have full oversight of the business rescue process.
This is a combination of expertise and professionals within the academic, financial, legal, and with a lot of aviation experience, with deep knowledge of the global aviation and transport in the world. So it will give the airline a new perspective that has been sorely missing at that level.
Continuity may be a far stretch, though, as this is the 6th year. Philip Saunders was also appointed as interim head in July and is the 11th CEO in 11 years. SAA counted over $1 billion in losses over the last 3 years and has failed to record a profit in over a decade. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A look at other corporate news. In the UK, Barclays Bank has been hit with a $34.9 million fine for poor treatment of more than 1.5 million struggling borrowers. It is the largest fine ever issued by the Financial Conduct Authority for a breach of consumer credit rules. The FCA said the bank had failed to properly contact customers who fell into arrears and had not had appropriate conversations about their individual circumstances. German sportswear giant Adidas says it's contemplating on keeping its Reebok brand, which is mainly focused on the US market. Adidas bought Reebok for $3.8 billion in 2006. Potential buyers of the brand include private equity firm Peninah and Timberland brand owner VF. Adidas said the possible sale was part of the development of its new 5-year strategy. And UK retail giant Debenhams has launched a closing down sale in stores and online. with up to 70% off items as it prepares to permanently close its doors. The 242-year-old retailer went into liquidation on December 1st. Debenhams has already cut 6,500 jobs since May, where it still has around 12,000 employees. That's a look at some of the corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business. Still ahead. Mini-grids to play a critical role in bridging Africa's power needs. And earnings for Tanzania's cashew nut growers expected to fall this year.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global Business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Peninah. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Over 600 million people in Africa still do not have access to electricity. Experts say that mini-grids have a critical role to play in bridging that gap by helping to improve availability of energy across the continent. Data from the International Energy Agency forecasts that mini-grids will be the least costly method to connect over 260 million people by 2030 and help reduce poverty by providing power solutions that will create opportunities for growth of business and other development. Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria and Ghana are just some of the countries with frameworks and supportive policies to expand energy access through mini-grids. All right, so Humphrey Wireko is the Associate Principal of Cross-Boundary Energy Access. He joins us live via Zoom from Nairobi. Humphrey, it's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. So energy developers believe that mini-grids can essentially help bridge the power gap in Africa, where we're talking of 600 million people without access to electricity. So talk to us about this plan and the role that mini-grids can play in realizing this goal.
Good evening, Peninah, and thank you so much for having me on today. I want to answer your question in two parts. So the first part is the problem. We know that half of Africa today doesn't have access to electricity. So that's that 600 million people. And that figure is expected to essentially stay the same from now till 2030 at current electrification rates and population growth rates. The solution here is mini-grids. And so solar mini-grids are a way of providing power to communities that aren't connected to the main grid. And they are actually the least cost solution, like you said, for over 260 million people in Africa. So of those 600 million people who don't have power, mini-grids are the least cost solution for almost half of them.
Right. And so, you know, when investors talk about investing in mini-grids, for instance, they'll often give reasons such as maybe the political environment, and other regulatory hurdles that hinder them from putting their investments, for instance, in mini-grids. So talk to us about how they can maneuver through this, and also how this has impacted in the expansion of people getting electricity in the continent.
So historically, there have been about 3 barriers to bringing private finance into the mini-grid sector. So one of them is the economics of connecting rural customers. A second one being the regulations and the regulatory challenges you just mentioned. And a third being access to capital. Where we've seen a lot of improvements and momentum in the first 2. So for example, a recent World Bank report found that mini-grid capital costs have dropped by 50% in the last 8 years. And that's been mostly driven by the sharp declines in costs of solar panels and in cost of batteries. We've also seen a lot of supportive regulations recently, especially in countries like Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Zambia, and Benin. A great example of some of these regulations that are great for mini-grids and mini-grid developers and mini-grid finance is reducing the time that it takes for mini-grids to get a license. Where we haven't seen as much progress is access to capital. And so here, the International Energy Agency forecasts that we need $187 billion of public and private capital mobilized into the mini-grid sector between now and 2030 to reach universal electrification. But we've only seen in the last 8 years, mini-grids raise about $350 million in equity. So that's the gap that we're trying to close.
And interestingly, Humphrey, as I listen to you talk about the International Energy Agency talking about, the cost of putting up these mini-grids by 2030, they say it's the least cost method to have these 600 million plus people connected to the mini-grid. So what role can governments play to ensure the success of these mini-grids in the continent?
Governments are extremely critical to the success of mini-grids and the success of energy access on the continent. So a good analogy would be like the early 2000s with the solar market. There you saw progressive governments create regulations and policies that really supported rooftop solar. They also provided subsidy programs and helped facilitate these subsidy programs that really helped the market grow. That's what we need now. Donor programs funded by the likes of the World Bank or the IFC have also played a really critical role here. And not only do they provide funds to kickstart these subsidy programs, but they also provide governments with assistance in crafting their policies and crafting regulations in order to make the mini-grid ecosystem thrive.
All right. So we know that you, Cross-Boundary Energy Access, have come up with an approach to encourage investment, and for infrastructure development. Talk to us more about this plan that you have.
So this open source plan the open source that we've launched, a good analogy here would be Tesla. So it wasn't too long ago that Tesla open sourced the design for their first electric car. And the thinking there was, we know that we need a more sustainable approach to transportation, and we know that electric cars can help there, and we need more electric car manufacturers. Very similarly here, when we look at mini-grids, we know that we need more finance for mini-grids. We, along with our partners, have developed a way to project finance mini-grids, and we are open sourcing that and sharing that knowledge so that others can use it as needed and improve upon it. So specifically what we're open sourcing, I think typically when people think about open source, they think of the software industry and they think about publishing software. But in a more general way, open source is really about knowledge sharing and about collaboration. So in our industry, that knowledge share means that we're publishing contracts, we're publishing financial models as well.
All right, Humphrey, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. That was Humphrey Wireko joining us live from Nairobi via Zoom. Now, earnings for Tanzania's cashew nut growers are expected to fall this year due to crop diseases and the effects of climate change. Reports from the country's cashew nut board show that nut production will be short of the target by over 20% this year, following a drop in yield. Earlier projections targeted production of at least 278,000 tons for the 2020-2021 harvest season, but board officials say this may not be reached. CGTN's Daniel Kijo explains.
Cashew nuts are one of Tanzania's key cash crops, and the country is among the top traditional cashew nut producing countries in the world. About 250,000 farmers in Lindi, Mtwara, Ruvuma, and Coast Region depend on cashew nut farming for their livelihood. But crop diseases and weather changes in plantations in Tanzania's cashew production areas have affected output over the last few years. The Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania reports show in 2018, Tanzania earned about $575 million for exporting about 313,000 tons of cashew, before declining to 225,000 tons in the next season, 2018-2019. Prior to the start of the 2020-2021 season, the government had forecast that its production would rise. However, revised projections show that the country's production in the coming season will be short of the target by 55,000 tons, going down 20%. With the new projections, cashew nut production is expected to be less by over 10,000 tons compared to the previous season's volumes. So far, the country has produced cashew nuts worth around $163.8 million, sold by 6 cooperative units in the 4 major growing regions of Mtwara, Lindi, Ruvuma, and the Coast Region. About 90% of the country's raw cashew nut is exported to India, with a small portion, which is less than 10%, is processed internally. However, the government has established a special fund to enable farmers to acquire inputs and also to increase the number of cashew nut extension officers in order to revive the sector. It is also moving to attract global buyers by trading online via the Tanzania Mercantile Exchange System. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
A groundbreaking ceremony for the construction of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention headquarters has been held. The project is part of a commitment that China made to Africa 2 years ago during the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing. African Union officials during the event thanked the Chinese government and President Xi Jinping for having kept their promise to the continent. CGTN's Grum Chala reports.
This was a moment of joy and excitement for Africa and Africans as the unveiling of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention headquarters construction project got underway. Ethiopian and Chinese government officials, as well as those from the African Union, were all there for the historic groundbreaking ceremony for what will be the future seat of the Continental Health Body. The project is fully financed by the government of China.
This building, it is a building that we want, it is a building that we need. It will raise the capacity of our testing, our surveillance systems, help us also to build our technical capacity in the area of diagnostics.
It all started a couple of years back with a promise by Chinese President Xi Jinping to build and gift this headquarters to the continent. And with this event, Beijing has shown Africa and the world that it has kept its promises.
Today's ceremony symbolizes the groundbreaking of this project, and I believe it will become a new landmark of Addis and the testimony of China-Africa solidarity against COVID-19.
This $200 million future Africa CDC headquarters will have state-of-the-art laboratories, office complex, and residential buildings in it. It's expected to be completed in a 2 years' time. And there is still more support from China heading to Africa.
China will try to make vaccines a global public good, which is accessible and affordable for African countries. China is joining hands with Africa to build an ever stronger China-African community with a shared future.
Strengthening continental health systems and building an African-owned health body were all part of Agenda 2063, the 50 years development plan for Africa. The AU says serious partners like China are helping make the African dream become a concrete reality.
We are looking for friends to support Africa. We are looking for those who are serious about the future of this continent. And when we say strategic partnerships, and when we mention strategic partnerships, China comes first. And we appreciate very much this partnership we have with China.
10 years ago, China gifted this African Union Commission headquarters to the continent. And now, yet another show of solidarity has been displayed through this new Africa CDC project. For Africa, given the growing health challenge across the continent, the construction of this Africa CDC headquarters and its operation at full capacity would mean a lot. Member states even hope to see the new headquarters as a center of excellence for training and knowledge transfer. Grumtala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
This is Global Business, coming up after the break. China's economic growth expected to accelerate in 2021. And social media giant Facebook faces more lawsuits.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
In other news making headlines, Nigerian insurgent group Boko Haram has claimed responsibility for the recent abduction of more than 300 schoolboys from a secondary school in Nigeria's northwestern Katsina state. Hundreds of gunmen on motorbikes surrounded a boarding school on Friday night and opened fire on police, witnesses said, before rounding up students and dragging them into the woods. Nigeria has been dealing with more than 10 years of insurgency, which has claimed the lives of more than 20,000 people and displaced 3 million more. Kenya says it will not retaliate against Somalia's move to expel its diplomats from Mogadishu, but will instead seek diplomatic solutions to the current spat with Mogadishu. The Kenyan government spokesman says Kenya will set up a mediation team to look into the issues raised by Somalia in order to strike a diplomatic solution between the two neighboring countries. Somalia has cut diplomatic ties with Kenya, accusing Nairobi of violating its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and interfering with upcoming elections. The announcement Tuesday came as the leader of the breakaway territory of Somaliland ended a 3-day visit to Kenya, where he was given treatment similar to that accorded to a head of state in meetings with the Kenyan leadership. And finally, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has hailed the official removal of Sudan from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. The designation of Sudan as a state sponsor of terrorism dates back to 1993. The delisting comes after the transitional government in Khartoum paid $335 million to American victims of terrorist attacks and has shown willingness to normalize ties with Israel. Sudan was put on the U.S. list after the first attack on the World Trade Center in New York in 1993. And that's a look at some of the day's top stories. Vaccinations have begun in the United States. An intensive care nurse was among the first of millions who will get the shot in the coming days. A hopeful moment as the death toll hit another heartbreaking milestone. CGTN's Dan Williams has more.
A pivotal moment in the United States and the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Frontline healthcare workers receiving the newly authorized coronavirus vaccines. In Long Island, New York, this intensive care unit nurse received the first of 2 doses as photographers were on hand to document the long-awaited moment.
I'm relieved. I feel like healing is coming. I hope this marks the beginning to the end of a very painful time in our history. I want to instill public confidence that the vaccine is safe.
There were similar scenes in New Orleans, Louisiana, with an infectious disease doctor among the first to receive the vaccine there, while staff at the Pittsburgh Medical Center also received theirs. Chicago would begin its first vaccinations on Tuesday. Roseland Community Hospital recently purchased this ultra-cold freezer in order to ensure the vaccine could be stored correctly. The Pfizer vaccine needs to be stored at -70 degrees Celsius. Mark McGee is the hospital's emergency preparedness manager.
It's heartbreaking because I've had family members in the hospital. I've had family members that passed away from COVID. And it's a personal thing for me to make sure that this goes right the first time around.
The US vaccine rollout provides some light at the end of this desperately dark tunnel. The pandemic could soon potentially be at an end. But in the short term, authorities are quick to stress that the risks of COVID-19 remain. There is still a long line of people at this hospital waiting for a COVID-19 test. Each day, the state of Illinois records thousands of new cases. It comes as the US passed the grim milestone of 300,000 COVID-19 deaths.
My biggest concern is that we stay diligent. We make sure we're still doing the same thing. We're wearing our masks. We're doing our social distancing. We're following the same CDC guidelines going forward until enough people are vaccinated where we can start relaxing those restrictions.
It's expected the average American, those not deemed high risk, will begin to receive the vaccine by next spring. There is now hope the pandemic is nearing an end.
Where your papers at?
But a difficult path still lies ahead. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
Latest numbers show China's economy continues its quick recovery from the pandemic. Retail sales, a key trend of consumption, surged by 5% last month, and that's up from 4.3% the month before, and the highest since last year. It marks the 4th month in a row of expansion. Meanwhile, investment in property development rose 6.8%, picking up from the 6.3% increase in the first 10 months. Industrial production, a gauge of manufacturing and mining, grew by 7% last month. Total volume of trade in goods saw a 7.8% increase year-on-year. Exports increased, but imports were down. On the job market, the surveyed urban unemployment rate stands at 5.2%, which is slightly lower than in October. Meanwhile, China's economy is expected to grow by 7.8% in 2021. That as the country has brought the pandemic under control and returned to normal. The last report from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences shows a sign of optimism, citing China is the only major economy in the world to have achieved positive growth this year. However, it pointed out that global pandemic has not eased and China needs to strengthen consumption demand to further stimulate economic growth.
China is the only major economy in the world to have achieved positive growth this year. The economic recovery on the supply side is gathering pace as industrial production returned to pre-pandemic level. However, we still need to boost our consumption and investment demand.
The International Labour Organization says that the global job market is facing a highly uncertain recovery in the second half of the year. It adds in a report that a recovery this year is unlikely to return to pre-crisis levels, even in the regions that have recovered the fastest. The ILO says that 14% of working hours were lost in the second quarter of the year. That's equivalent to some 400 million full-time jobs. It previously estimated the loss of about 300 million jobs. The report also found several groups that have been more vulnerable to the shocks of the pandemic, namely women, migrants and informal workers. The ILO also said governments still need to work hard to ensure the right policy mixes. Social media giant Facebook is under fire again, and this time it may be up against the toughest legal battle it's ever faced, twin lawsuits from both the federal and state governments. Mark New tells us more.
Thank you, Ms. Dorsey. Mr. Zuckerberg.
Over the past year, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has been repeatedly dragged before the U.S. Congress over numerous issues, including monopolistic behavior in acquiring the photo-sharing app Instagram.
And in a later email, you confirmed that one of the purposes of Facebook acquiring Instagram would be to neutralize a competitor. You wrote those emails that were mentioned in that House report. Is that right?
I believe so. And I've always distinguished between two things, though. One is that we had some competition with Instagram in the growing space of kind of camera apps and photo sharing apps. But at the time, I don't think we or anyone else viewed Instagram as a competitor, as a kind of large multi-purpose social platform.
3 weeks later, 48 U.S. state attorneys general filed a suit claiming that if a company stepped into Facebook's turf, Zuckerberg would go into destroy mode, and they'd have to face the wrath of Mark. That same day, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission filed a suit alleging that Facebook squelched competition by acquiring Instagram and instant messaging service WhatsApp, quoting a Zuckerberg email saying it is better to buy than compete.
They're claiming that Facebook actually acquired these companies in the early 2010s because it wanted to kill off competition, not because it wanted to make services better for its users. But the problem is that the FTC is going to have to fight these big hypothetical arguments that consumers would have been better had these acquisitions not happened, which is tough because prices weren't increased. There's no price gouging that happened because all these services are free.
In a statement, Facebook's general counsel Jennifer Newstead called the lawsuits revisionist history, saying that their acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp were already reviewed by antitrust regulators at the time.
Facebook's general counsel also accuses the U.S. Federal Trade Commission and states of standing by while the company invested billions of dollars and millions of hours of time into making WhatsApp and Instagram into what they are today. She says before the purchases, WhatsApp had very little presence in the U.S. and Instagram just 13 employees and no revenue.
The other thing that Facebook is going to have to argue is that, these companies actually are much stronger when they're all together, and they can solve some of Facebook's biggest existential problems better when they're one giant company with economies of scale. You can imagine it might be harder for companies like WhatsApp and Instagram to fight election interference or misinformation if they didn't have all of Facebook's resources behind them.
Constantine says if the lawsuits succeed, it could have a chilling effect on future acquisitions, but a legal victory won't come easy for government attorneys. He says the Federal Trade Commission is short-handed compared to Facebook, which pours millions of dollars into lobbying and has hundreds of lawyers who can fight lawsuits for years to come.
Digs to the goal line.
Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
Zimbabwe has launched an electric car, Nissan Leaf. This is as the Southern African nation prepares for the gradual shift from internal combustion vehicles to sustainable electric ones. Zimbabwe's energy regulator says the vehicles will support the country's renewable energy strategy. Here's Fry Makutoya with more details.
The vehicle technology of the future has arrived in Zimbabwe, and authorities hope that cars like this will become the kings of the streets. Although the country is getting on board the electric vehicle drive late, it's confident of making up ground.
We're still a long way as a country, but we want to leapfrog. There's already groundwork which was done, so we don't have much work to do in terms of breaking ground. We just have to take advantage of what has already been done.
A draft e-mobility policy has been developed to address the key questions around infrastructure and the country's long-standing power generation challenges.
What we also want to promote is the use of renewable energy in charging electric vehicles. It will be pointless that we take out internal combustion engines, take out fossil fuels, but at the same time we replace it with thermal power. You know, it will be defeating the whole purpose of e-mobility. So we're going to be encouraging that service stations, embrace renewable energy.
Proposals are also being tabled to extend incentives to players that invest in e-mobility infrastructure and those that import electric vehicles.
At the moment, the electric vehicles are a bit on the high side because there's no mass production. So we want to then try and bring down the cost so that through incentives so that we can have more vehicles coming into the country.
Zimbabwe's government has banned the importation of motor vehicles that are more than 10 years old in a bid to save foreign currency but also cut carbon emissions. It's seen as a further statement of intent to promote clean energy. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's go through the commodities markets, and oil rose further above $50 a barrel today as optimism from the rollout of coronavirus vaccines balanced out tighter lockdowns in Europe and forecasts of a slower demand recovery. The United States began vaccinating people on Monday as the country's COVID-19 death toll crossed the 300,000 mark. Britain and Canada have also begun to administer shots. Brent crude was up 14 cents or 0.3% at $50.43 a barrel at 14:35 GMT. Oil prices have recovered in the past few weeks, with Brent reaching $51.06 on December 10th, its highest since March, supported by hopes of a recovery in demand. Prices had dropped to historic lows in March as the pandemic took hold. Still to come here on Global Business. We'll take a look into the growth of Pan-African contemporary arts.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys. The greatest sights. The greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business. While most art fairs and large exhibitions have been postponed or replaced by online presentations due to the impact of COVID-19, the Melrose Gallery, in association with Sandton City in Johannesburg, are presenting an exhibition both physically and virtually. The thought-provoking group exhibition features established and emerging artists from Africa. CGTN's Zulisa Njamela went to the exhibition and filed the following report.
The exhibition takes place in a large 850 square meter space in Sentin City's Diamond Walk. This space provides the perfect backdrop for the display of a comprehensive Pan-African contemporary art. And the high ceilings allow for monumental sculptures and large-scale paintings and photographs. We asked the curator why they chose to exhibit in a mall, an unusual undertaking in South Africa's art industry.
Because art forever has been challenging what we define as display, what we define as art forever. So the fact that we're presenting here, it's to actually go against the grain and to, more importantly, expose contemporary African art to African audiences. Because in Africa, we don't have a culture that people go and visit galleries. Whereas in Europe and in the US and even in China and Asia, they've already got that culture of visiting.
Many artists have been forced into long periods of self-isolation in their studios as a result of the COVID-19 related restrictions and lockdown period. Rusike says this isolation has resulted in powerful artworks impacted by their focus, mood, and awakened sense of consciousness and enlightenment.
So the exhibition title is called Introspection, Art of Contemporary Africa. And essentially what it's about essentially taking what happened during COVID and lockdown and pondering on it, but more importantly, actually articulating the experience, but also the effect that it's going to have on us, but not on us, but on the art industry as well. And I think that art is the most profound way of expressing a language, but also expressing oneself. So the exhibition is about coming to the space and actually introspecting on yourself, but also introspecting on the moment that we're currently in. Because a moment like this has never happened in history, or a history that my parents or their parents have lived through.
I'm very grateful to be a part of this exhibition because in Africa, it's a lot of artists. And if I check here, it's not a lot of sculpture, it's just paintings and drawings. So for my side, I'm very grateful to see my artwork in this place like this, whereby a lot of people going up and down, walking around. Even if some, they're not coming in because of the COVID-19, but most of them, they see work through the window, and yeah, I very appreciate about that.
Some artworks here were not created during lockdown period, but have found space in the exhibition as their works and practice speak to the theme, introspection. Yudisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Nigeria, dog lovers got an opportunity to dress up their pets for the Lagos Dog Carnival. The annual event seeks to promote animal welfare and create awareness on the benefits of owning pets. Here's CGTN's Joy Kiruki with the details.
Every dog has its day. And on this day, it's a literal meaning for this 3-year-old Lhasa Apso named Gracie. Omoloya Faleye is the proud owner. She is grooming Gracie for the Lagos Dog Carnival.
We got her dress ready, and also we're trying to invite as many people as possible. You know, she had, a grooming done as well. She's been groomed already, all set for the Dog Carnival on Saturday.
Gracie and Faleye are part of the over 200 guests and 100 dogs that gathered for the second edition of the Lagos Dog Carnival, an event organized by animal rights activist Jackie Idimogu.
Lagos Dog Carnival is focused on bringing dog owners together, and the reason is because dog owners are underappreciated in Lagos, Nigeria. People don't really think much of animals. So this event is channeled at celebrating the humans that go all out, above and beyond for these animals.
It was a thrilling sight to behold. Dogs strutting the runway in sunglasses and different shades of bows and jackets.
I honestly didn't have any idea that people had this many dogs in Lagos, so it's a good, fun way to, come out, see all the other dog breeds, see what you can get for your dogs, because it's a little difficult getting things for your dogs sometimes.
It's nice to see that businesses are springing around pets, pet positive businesses. Also nice to see that there are a lot of dog lovers. Time to socialize, met old friends. Some of my dogs puppies, they came as well. So it was a very interesting time.
The awards on offer included Best Dressed Dog, Best Groomed, Best in Showmanship, Best Human and Dog Pair, amongst others. But it was an outright win for all pet lovers. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
And finally, we have a look at the currencies now. South Africa's rand has continued with its rally on the back of a stronger than expected GDP data announced by Statistics South Africa last week. Despite Statistics South Africa warning that the rebound was coming off a very low base, the currency has leapt over 1% and strengthened to below 15 rands to the dollar when the markets closed. And that's it for this edition of Global Business. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I am Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.